Sorry about that, babe.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be getting to the long-awaited Dark Souls 1 tier list. Kind of goes against the way that I am as a person. I usually do everything in order, but I've really jumped around with the modern From Software library tier list. I've done one for Dark Souls 3, all bosses. I think I was after I did my SL1 segmented, of course, no-hit all boss run. And then I did one for the Shadow of the Erdtree all bosses, but I don't think I've done any other tier lists for DS1, Demon Souls, Sekiro, Bloodborne, DS2, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go to DS1 today. DS1 is my favorite game in the quote-unquote modern From Software library. It's the one that I have the most playtime in, the one that I've beaten the most, the one that I've done the most challenge runs in, and again, it's my favorite. So the tier list criteria for this, it's going to be somewhat simple. We're not going to go super duper in depth on everything, but I'll try to touch on them with each boss. I want to talk about the challenge of the fight, kind of a mixture of first play, casual, and SL1 since I've done so many Soul Level 1 runs. I want to go over the design and the lore of the boss, how much I enjoy the music of the boss, and the arena, and that's kind of where I'm sticking on the path, so to speak, to grade all these bosses. So we're just going to go in order, as you see down there. So first will be the Four Kings, and then we'll go from there. It's from an S to a D tier, S being best, and D being the worst tier. So Four Kings. I actually love this fight. I think this fight is amazing. From a challenge standpoint, I think a first playthrough and an SL1 run, very challenging. Oftentimes people will go to the Four Kings and not be doing adequate damage, especially on a first playthrough. For SL1, one of the problems that you're going to run into if you're not super duper good and you're using like RTSR, meaning like you're not going to be able to get hit, which I've done before. I usually use the Fire Hand Axe just because it's a quicker weapon than the Reinforced Club, but it could definitely be a very challenging fight. In my opinion, it is one of the most challenging fights in the game, no matter what you're doing. Even on a casual run, there's been times where I'm like, oh, I'll be totally fine going down there. I think on my most recent run, if I remember correctly, I did a no roll run, but I think I went down +10 by accident instead of +15, and it was actually a lot more difficult than I thought, even with insane Havel armor and crazy high HP. Design-wise, love the way that they look. The lore is pretty cool too. Again, I'm not going to go super in depth. I have some notes off to the side and I'll look things up as I go. You know, they were given fragments of the Lord Soul from Gwyn originally. The Four Kings kind of reek of the Dark Wraiths from Lord of the Rings, essentially. They were kind of in the good graces, and when the first flame was fading, Darkstalker Koth basically came in, and New Londo, the kings were like corrupted, and then the Abyss started seeking in, and seeping, excuse me, and then of course they ended up flooding the New Londo ruins. There hasn't, I don't think, been a definitive reason as to why they got flooded or how they got flooded. Why they got flooded is, you know, I think pretty clear. And then the Dark Wraiths took over and all that kind of stuff, and that kind of ties into the next point. The arena is just a big black open abyss. You have to have the ring from the Sith fight in order to traverse it, otherwise you die right away. And I think the music really goes hand in hand with this fight very well. It's very, I'm not gonna say it's like scary, it's like sort of frenetic, and the fact that the Four Kings can keep spawning in, you know, over and over and over. There could be more than 4 kings on the screen, which is funny because they're called the Four Kings. And I think the music really lends itself perfectly to the fight. And for that reason, all those reasons, the Four Kings are an easy A tier for me. All right, and up next we have the Gaping Dragon. Let me figure out where it is on my tier list here. So many bosses, guys, so many bosses. All right, there we are. Gaping Dragon I have in the solid B tier. From a challenge standpoint, it's definitely not the most difficult boss in the game by any means. It could definitely do, I will say this, you could really get caught off guard by this boss. It could do major damage to you on the charge attack. There's also an attack where it kind of spews all this stuff all over, and that could be pretty tricky, especially to like a first time or a casual playthrough. SL1, I don't find it too difficult. The main weak spots obviously attack the head, and if you're able to cut off the tail, you do get a tail drop, and it kind of eliminates one of the attack moves from the Gaping Dragon. it's, I'd say, adequate difficulty across. If anything, probably leaning towards a little bit easier than some. Design-wise, absolutely love it. It's just this crazy, discombobulated, weird archdragon that's been twisted over the years. Kind of ties into the lore. From what I understand and from what I read, it's sort of like it became corrupted over time and gluttonous and all that kind of stuff, and that kind of transformed into the deformity that you see before you, with the crazy like rib cage area mouth underneath the head. It's just very strange, but I love the way that it looks. And also, when you kill the Gaping Dragon, it drops the key to Blighttown, the traditional entrance to Blighttown from the depths. So it's almost kind of like it's like a guardian to Blighttown in a way, I guess inadvertently. And I know that there was a lore video recently by Hawkshaw, which presented some pretty interesting things in terms of like where the world is constructed. Basically, it can be inferred that like runoff and stuff was being dripped down, and the Gaping Dragon is essentially spewing out like toxic poop and goo, because that's kind of what it's been eating. Yeah, there's a little bit more detail to that in his video. That's just a little part that I kind of pulled from it, but definitely very interesting. Music-wise, I think it's pretty good. The music itself, I guess, sounds like it would be a dragon fight, and it matches the scale really well, if that makes sense, because the Gaping Dragon's huge, especially when it's like standing upward to flex out the ribcage area, and I think it does a really good job of being like intimidating and a grand scale, if you will. And the arena itself is pretty interesting. It's a big wide open arena. There's actually loot on the arena. You could fall off the arena from the area that the Gaping Dragon comes up from, and you have a almost Demon Souls / Bloodborne type thing going on, where if you don't kill the channeler in the depths, the channeler could actually pew you with spells from above, which could also add to the difficulty of the fight. And overall, it's definitely one of my favorite fights in the game, hence why it's in the B tier. Yeah, good times. And up next we have Great Grey Wolf Sif, who I have in the C tier. From a challenge standpoint, I feel like the fight is okay. I definitely wouldn't say it's very difficult. If you're doing pretty good damage or you have a high level weapon, it's actually incredibly easy. I don't find this fight to be too difficult either at soul level 1. It can get a little tricky if you're doing like no damage. And one of the things that I kind of don't like about this fight, Sif hops around a lot, has some wonky hitboxes. Traditionally, it's better to get underneath Sif in order to do damage, but even then, the way that Sif kind of moves, depending on what weapon you have and the tracking of the weapon, you could end up missing a lot, and you can get jumped on, which sometimes won't do damage, but it'll like knock your character around, or you can get some like random chip damage from it. It's just, I don't know, it's a little janky, because you're not really just gonna stand at attention and fight Sif head on. It's best to get underneath the body. And anytime, you know, in the FromSoft games where you start dealing with like bigger bosses with things like that, it could be a little jank at times. It's not bad or anything, but it's certainly not my favorite. Design-wise, it's pretty cool. Obviously, you got a giant great gray wolf with a sword in its mouth, jumping around like crazy, right? And then, of course, when Sif gets damaged at a certain lower HP threshold, Sif actually starts kind of limping around and moving slowly. Super sad. I guess tying into the lore, which is also sad, Sif was Artorias' companion, basically, and in the base game, Sif is guarding the grave of Artorias in the Dark Root area. And again, defeating Sif gives you the Covenant of Artorias ring, which allows you to traverse the Abyss to go fight the 4 kings later on, which you need to do in order to beat the game. Yeah, you know, so obviously it's sad. Also, pretty cool thing, a lot of people probably know this already. If you go into the battle, normally, you know, you get like an opening cutscene, this, that, and the other, it's fine, whatever. If you go into the DLC first, which is possible, and then you go back and you fight Sif, Sif kind of gives you a little bit of a longer look and a smell, sort of recognizes you from that other world, because Sif is actually encountered in the Chasm of the Abyss area in the DLC. And obviously you can fight Artorias in the DLC too. It's a cool little thing that they throw in. Music-wise, pretty memorable. I feel like I've seen it get used in a lot of videos. I think the one thing that I would say, it encapsulates how emotional and sad that the fight could be and what the fight stands for, if that makes sense. Overall, pretty good track. And the arena, fairly big. Again, the Grave of Artorias is pretty cool. I like the whole Dark Root area in general. I'm not going to sit there and say it's like the best boss arena that they've ever made, but I'd certainly say it's at least above average. And that's kind of where Sif sits for me. A pretty decent fight. And up next we have, I guess, the main antagonist and the final boss of the game, Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, who I sit pretty easily in the B tier. Maybe not where you'd expect when we kind of go through the whole list. Challenge-wise, Gwyn's interesting because Gwyn could actually be a very difficult fight. If you parry Gwyn, it's an incredibly easy fight. He has very easily manipulated AI where you parry, riposte, and then typically if you chug an Estus, even if you're not hurt, Gwyn will follow up with a very easily parried attack. And usually during that string, if you end up missing the parry, like sometimes he could do a quick slash, but then usually after you miss that, he'll follow it up with a slow one very shortly thereafter, which you can kind of get him back in the parry loop once again. And it really trivializes the fight. Now, if you don't parry, it's actually pretty difficult. Gwyn is, even though he's like fading and in his weakest form, he's very powerful and very frenetic. He has a grab attack. He could lunge at you across from the arena, and he could really do a lot of damage, especially if you don't have good armor. So yeah, it's kind of like a hit or miss challenge thing. Kind of the same across the board, in my opinion, for first play casual and SL1. Design-wise, pretty cool. You know, he's Gwyn, right? But he's getting weak, and you can kind of see that. He's like decrepit and fading and looks like the living death. Lore-wise, you know, I don't want to get too far into it. Gwyn's obviously like the head honcho of you know, he's the fire guy, right? He's linking the fire, and he's fading away in the killing of the first flame. He's pretty much the one that started the civilization that is fading away. You know, the whole thing with the hollows and this, that, and the other. You know, Gwyn has an insane lore dump, so if you don't know all that already, I'd advise looking it up or something. Music-wise, incredibly epic. Probably not what you're expecting. You'd expect some crazy grand score, but he has the plin plin plan, as everybody refers to it online, where it's just a very morose, sad, downtrodden piano tune that it's one of the most memorable soundtracks in the entire game. Obviously makes a bit of a remix comeback for Soul of Cinder in Dark Souls 3 when he starts doing Gwyn's moves at the second phase. It's just very iconic. One of the best tracks in the game easily. In the arena, you know, in general, I wish the kiln of the first flame was a little bit bigger. The arena itself is okay, kind of matches the aesthetic of the rest of the area. I don't really have anything bad to say about it, but I don't think it's the best arena by far, so. And anyway, because of that, B tier. And up next, we have the Iron Golem, who I also put in the B tier. And surprisingly, I actually put the Iron Golem ahead of Gwyn and the Gaping Dragon. Challenge-wise, the fight can be difficult on a first play / casual / SL1. Main reason for it being a little bit difficult is the Iron Golem can easily kick you off the edge for instant death. In terms of like sustaining insane amount of damage or what have you, I don't find it to be too difficult on that front. And one of the cool things too, it's basically a sort of callback to Tower Knight from Demon Souls, where you know you hit the limbs, right, the legs of Tower Knight, and Tower Knight will fall, and then you can do massive damage. Well, same goes for the Iron Golem. If you do enough damage to the leg, it'll fall down, and you can do massive damage, or you could actually knock it off the ledge. So here's a funny thing: despite how many times I've beaten this game, how many challenge runs I've done, I cannot consistently get the Iron Golem to fall off the ledge. I guess I never really looked into it because I don't really care too much. I'm not a speedrunner by any means, but that is another cool little thing that they threw in terms of the mechanics of the fight. Design-wise, it's a big Iron Golem. It's pretty cool. Lore-wise, it's pretty simple. It's basically this huge chunk of armor that was set up by the gods in order to basically be a gatekeeper or a guardian to Anor Londo. Only after defeating the Iron Golem, getting through Sen's Fortress, are you able to be transported to Anor Londo. So yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward, right? It's the gatekeeper. Music-wise, so it's a bit interesting to cover this because I love the Iron Golem track. I think the Iron Golem track is one of the best in the game, if not like top 3. It's just a banger. Like, that's all I gotta say. It's a banger track. The problem is, it gets reused. The Stray Demon, who we'll cover later, has the same exact song, and this happens a couple times in this game, which we'll cover as well when we get there. It like cheapens it just a little bit, you know what I mean? In my opinion, the soundtrack for the Iron Golem should have been the soundtrack for the Iron Golem. The Stray Demon should have just got something different, but nevertheless, the song itself is great, and it's hard to like knock it down just because it gets reused, but still. In arena-wise, again, pretty interesting. You know, you're basically at the end of Sen's Fortress before Anor Londo. You have the possibility of getting knocked off the ledge. There's like rubble in the middle. You can knock the Iron Golem off the ledge. So all in all, I actually kind of like the arena. So it's pretty good. Also, I'm fairly certain, yes, there are other golems in Sen's Fortress that throw like fire bombs and stuff. And there's one in particular that if you don't kill it, it can throw fire bombs towards the start of the arena. So it's advised if you don't kill it to go towards the back. I go towards the back anyway, but yeah. So all in all, I think it's a very, very good boss, and it's a solid B tier for me. Up next, we have the Moonlight Butterfly, who I have in the C tier and below Sif. From a challenge standpoint, to a lesser extent, not as much as the Four Kings, the Moonlight Butterfly can serve as a DPS boss. The Moonlight Butterfly, well, flies around a lot during the fight and only comes down to chomp on some foliage in order to actually heal itself and kind of recharge. So if you don't have any ranged attacking, you're at the mercy of kind of dodging and waiting it out. At runs where you're not doing much damage, it could be a little difficult. I would advise coming back with a better weapon personally. It's an optional boss, obviously, you can come back whenever. And I did beat the Moonlight Butterfly SL1 without getting any damage. It could be a little difficult though, because the Moonlight Butterfly again shoots like all these projectiles. There's like a big one that does a lot of damage. It's easy to dodge, but then there's these like other ones that are they're quite crazy, and unless you really know the fight inside and out, like as far as positioning goes and dodging timing, it can be pretty hard to not get hit by it. But yeah, all in all, yeah, it's like one of those things. It's like if you have a really tanky build and a really good weapon, even if you don't have a ranged attack, you just kind of got to wait it out, and then you could probably kill the Moonlight Butterfly in 1 or 2 eating cycles. So kind of hit or miss. Definitely a little bit more challenging on low level / low weapon level runs for sure. Design wise, I think it's really interesting, really cool. And lore wise, it was another amalgamation, if you will, created by Seath. Similar to the Picasas and whatnot, so it's been speculated that it was probably a human at some point. I was also doing some reading, and I don't know if this is accurate, but the Great Moths that are a lot smaller in Dark Souls 2, apparently some of these migrated from Lordran to Drangleic and became them. Again, I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know. I do not know that much in-depth stuff about Dark Souls 2 lore outside of the main storyline, so if so, that's pretty cool. Music wise, it's funny that we just did the Iron Golem. Another soundtrack that I love, but it's also reused for Dark Sun Gwyndolin, and I guess you could probably argue that it's technically probably Dark Sun Gwyndolin's theme, right? But it is a mystical, whimsical, I love the soundtrack for the Moonlight Butterfly, and again, it gets reused for Gwyndolin, and then much like some of the other things, it gets reused in Dark Souls 3 for Aldrich, because Aldrich devours Gwyndolin, so you get that little hint of the Moonlight Butterfly / Gwyndolin soundtrack going on later in that game. Arena, it's, you know, part of the Darkroot area, and you're fighting it on a straight walkway bridge, so it's very confined. There's not a lot of room to move, and it's just a path. I actually kind of like that. It adds to the mechanics of the fight. I feel like if you were able to move around a lot more, the fight would be incredibly easy, because you could just like run away from everything, where this, you are constrained and can take damage. All in all though, I don't think it's like a, you know, a game altering or one of the goats of Dark Souls, so solid C tier, leave it there. All right, up next we have Gravelord Nito, and I don't know if this is going to be a surprise to some people, but I only have Nito in the C tier, and I actually have Nito below both Sif and the Moonlight Butterfly. From a challenge standpoint, Nito can be pretty difficult for a couple reasons. Nito is accompanied by a bunch of skeletons in his boss arena. The more you move around and move further back, the more skeletons get aggroed. If you stay towards the beginning of the arena, you're only going to have to deal with a few of them. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, the skeletons are, revivable by necromancy, right? So unless you have an occult weapon or you kill Nito, they keep respawning over and over, which can be pretty difficult. So if you don't have an occult weapon, obviously you have to kind of get to Nito as quickly as possible. So from a challenge standpoint, it can be difficult. I advise just, again, sticking towards the beginning of the arena. By this point of the game, you're probably in good armor, have pretty high health, so it's not going to be terrible if you have a good weapon. SL1 can be a little bit tricky because of that, having to kind of navigate all the other skeletons that are coming through. Nito has the ability to kill the skeletons for you, not permanently, but the AoE attack will knock them out. Yeah, it's like kind of an eh. Like, as far as Nito himself, it's really an easy fight. There's not a whole lot of, shenanigans going on, other than when Nito sticks his, does the Gravelord sword dance thing or whatever, and sticks the sword into the ground, and then you can get toxicked at the beginning of the fight too, mind you. And when you fall into the arena, you're going to take pretty hefty damage too. So it's more of an annoyance thing and not so much of a Nito is hard thing. That makes sense. Design-wise, I think he looks pretty sick. He's literally like, the Lord of the Dead, necromancy sort of deal. He's obviously one of the head honchos as well, one of the 4 Lord Souls. All over the first cutscene of the game. One of the big sealed behind the you can't get to him without placing the Lord Vessel. He was there fighting the ancient dragons along with Gwyn, so pretty cool from that standpoint. Music wise, I feel like his soundtrack fits him well, but I don't care for it. I you know what I'm saying? Like, I never go like, oh yeah, I'm gonna wake up and listen to the Nito theme this morning. I need to get my day started. It's like, it's good, it's thematic, but it's not memorable or epic to me in any way. In the arena, yeah, it's pretty cool, You're down there with all the dead and the skellies, and you got the giant tombs and stuff, and it's sort of, again, designed to deal with the gank. Like, you got a thing in the middle and you can kind of run around and, get people caught up on ledges or what have you, and nothing crazy. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Nito. Like, again, I like his design. The lore is pretty cool, but otherwise it's just and that's why he's in the C tier for me. All right, now on to one of the most popular, possibly polarizing fights in the history of the Souls games. And that's Ornstein and Smough, who I have in the B tier, and I do have them above all of the current B tier applicants, if you will. And as I just noticed, as the tier list kind of moves up, you're going to see the save or download button. I'm just recording off of a browser, so bear with me there. Challenge-wise, can be very challenging. A lot of people struggle with gank fights where there's 2v1. Obviously, Ornstein and Smough has a very distinct Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1, you have to deal with both of them. Phase 2, you deal with whoever you didn't kill with. So with that said, in Phase 1, focus all your damage on one of them, because you can't kill both anyway. I always go for the kill Ornstein first and then deal with Super Smough. I find Super Smough to be very easily manipulated with the pillars. It's not that Super Ornstein's like incredibly difficult or anything like that. I just find Super Smough to be easier, and I do find that Ornstein's a little bit easier to track down in Phase 1, even with all of his jumping around and all that. Smough could be a little bit more chaotic with his charges and all that. So, but yeah, I find it to be a very challenging fight, especially in the first playthrough. That's another one where if you're not doing good damage, you could be there for a while. I know a lot of people got hung up on Ornstein and Smough in their first play. SL1, it can be challenging, but I've done this fight so much that I don't find it to be too difficult anymore, and it was actually a relatively easy fight for me. SL1, no hit, no damage, and I did an Armor of Thorns run. It took like a half hour, but it's one of those fights where I kind of know it inside and out at this point, but definitely like first play can be very challenging. The design of them, really cool. You got like this dude who's like normal sized, presumably jacked, You got this big fat dude who, by the way, if you look it up, apparently Smough's jacked under the armor. Look it up, I'm telling you. You might think he's a fatty, because he's like a gluttonous dude who eats bones, but yeah, apparently he's jacked. Maybe it's the bone marrow. I don't know. Lore-wise, they're kind of, you know, there to be the last, I guess almost Iron Golem-y, but for the Lord Vessel. Like, you have to take care of them before you can get the Lord Vessel. And there's also some rumors, I believe, that... God, I can't remember which one it is. I think, like... I don't think any of this has been verified, but obviously you find Ornstein's equipment in Dark Souls 3 by the Nameless King. So I think there's been rumors that Smough is actually there, and that it's possible that Ornstein's like an illusion. I don't know. I remember reading a lot about that many years ago. Just thought it'd be interesting to share. Music-wise, it's pretty iconic. The Ornstein and Smough theme is used a lot. It's been remixed into like the Space Jam theme. It's very chaotic. It's not as chaotic as some of the other chaotic tracks, but it's sort of chaotic. It's just it's a solid track. It's a banger. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. And the arena is pretty well built, especially to manage a gank fight. There's all these pillars. The pillars can be destroyed, but you could still kind of use them to keep Smough at bay. And I think it's very, very helpful for both Phase 1 and Phase 2. And overall, very solid fight. I think it's one of the best gank fights in the series of the modern FromSoft games, and for that reason I have them at a high B. Up next we have, oftentimes referred to as a meme, Pinwheel. So you might be surprised where I have Pinwheel, possibly, I don't know, maybe. I have Pinwheel in the C tier, and I actually have Pinwheel above Nito and Moonlight Butterfly, but below Sif. So Pinwheel is often considered a joke, because more often than not, players will get to Pinwheel later than initially expected, or allegedly designed to. So typically players will come in and hit Pinwheel 3 or 4 times and Pinwheel will be dead and you'll be like, huh? And then you get the Rite of Kindling, which allows you to bump up your bonfire kindling to great heights, I think up to plus 20, right? And you usually get, well, not usually, you do get a mask drop, either Mask of the Father, Child, or Mother. And yeah, so challenge-wise, Pinwheel is either a joke, and this will be first play casual or SL1, or Pinwheel will be very difficult if you go down to the catacombs early with a not so great weapon. Pinwheel could actually be insanely difficult because a bunch of these like clone Pinwheels come into the arena and they're shooting stuff at you left and right, and it could be pretty hectic. Pinwheel with the Armor of Thorns run I did was pretty interesting as well, because obviously I'm doing really bad damage the whole fight. But yeah, so hit or miss. It's either going to be the easiest fight in the whole game or can be quite difficult. Design-wise, I think he looks really cool. I love the masks. The cutscene is really sick, like when the masks like start like looking at each other, sort of thing. So lore-wise, the Pinwheels were servants of Gravelord Nito, and they were taught necromancy. At some point, this main Pinwheel, I guess, stole the Rite of Kindling in some way, shape, or form from Nito. So it's kind of like a thief Pinwheel, if you will. And then with that, Pinwheel taught necromancy to a bunch of undead, which is essentially why the catacombs are the way they are. And there's other Pinwheels outside of Nito's domain. I remember there were some other lore dives into whether or not this Pinwheel was doing necromancy research to try to like revive his family or something, and that's why there's like the mask of the, you know, the mother, the child, and the father. I don't know if that's ever really verified or if that's just like lore deep dive stuff, but it's still pretty interesting. I feel like Pinwheel has a lot, you know, not a lot, but a decent backstory that you, again, typically when you go in and just blast him into oblivion, you're not even thinking about. Music-wise, I think his track is better than Nito's. Again, most people don't even hear it very often because you just kill him so quickly, but it's actually a very eerie track, and I think it matches Pinwheel almost perfectly. And the arena is really cool too. Much like Nito, it's an arena that you drop down into and you sustain some damage, which kind of sucks. I guess that's a recurring theme for Catacomb and Tomb of the Giants. But yeah, it's like, you can kind of see it's like a giant tomb thing almost, with, I think there's some shallow water in it if I remember correctly, and there's like books and he's doing research all over the place, and it's actually pretty cool. Pinwheel, should have a little bit more respect, but the fact of the matter is, typically, again, when people get to Pinwheel, you just destroy him, and it's it's an afterthought. So, like, if you treat it like that, yeah, probably bottom a C or potentially D, but when you kind of really analyze Pinwheel for when you're supposed to fight and what it is, I do think it's actually a pretty solid upper C tier boss. Alright, up next we have Seath the Scaleless, and I don't know if this is going to be a bit of a controversial take as well. You'll kind of see as we flesh out the rest of the list more, but Seath is only going to be in the C tier for me. I actually don't really like this fight that much. I feel like from a challenge standpoint, it can be hit or miss. Again, by the time you get there, you're probably going to be pretty overpowered and have really good armor, and the fight's not going to be very difficult. It bears mentioning, again, you have to break the crystal in the back of the arena to do damage to Seath in the first place. If you don't do that, Seath is invincible. It could also be difficult too, because on a first play you might run in and get the one or two of the clams that are outside of the boss arena in there with you. If you do, obviously you could just like save, quit, and restart the fight or whatever, but if you kind of go in and don't do that, it can be difficult. At times, SL1 could be difficult as well. When I did my no-hit run and my Armor of Thorns run, that's when I kind of had to really learn the fight inside and out. Seath does a lot of like AoE attacks, and there's the two most difficult ones to dodge, if you will, are the huge AoEs that can curse you, and the frenetic like tail swipes that happen. And you can cut Seath's tail, by the way. Overall though, I mean, I like the design of Seath. I think Seath looks really cool. Like the colors. I really like the crystal caves, but I wish they were bigger. That's for another video. And lore-wise, obviously, he's a descendant of the primordial archdragons. He was born without scales, duh, Seath the Scaleless. And he's like one of the head honchos with Gwyn. Has a Lord Soul. He is required to beat in order to beat the game. Also, Seath is kind of it's a throwback to Kingsfield. There's a Seath character in the Kingsfield series. So yeah, like lore-wise and design-wise, pretty cool. Seath does all these like crazy experiments, and like I said, turns the humans into the Picasas, created the Moonlight Butterfly, so on and so forth. But as far as like the actual fight goes, the soundtrack's interesting. I feel like it's very unique to Seath. Like it's one of those ones where you hear it and you go like, oh, that's Seath's soundtrack, but I don't find it to be overly emotional, overly catchy, overly like epic by any means. It's just kind of there. And again, as far as the aesthetics of the general area, I like the arena. I like the fact that, you know, there is a little bit of a gimmick in having to break the crystal. But all in all, the Seath the Scaleless fight doesn't really do it for me. I don't know. Maybe I'm alone in this. It's alright. You know, it's not inherently bad by any means. It just, C tier. Alright, up next we have the Asylum Demon, who is the game's de facto, tutorial boss, if you will. And I actually think the Asylum Demon is one of the best tutorial / first bosses in the modern FromSoft library. And because of that, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I have the Asylum Demon at the top of the C tier. I actually almost pushed it to a B tier. Now, from a challenge standpoint, obviously, casually, like on a future playthrough, even SL1, because that likely won't be your first playthrough, it's not a hard fight by any means. It's, pretty defined moveset. You got the butt slam, you got the swipes and the forward slam with the staff. But again, keeping in mind it's the first boss of the game designed to be a tutorial boss, I think it's very good. Some people might struggle a little bit with it on the first play. I might have died once, I can't remember. But I just think it's a very fair, good tutorial boss that kind of gets you into the mechanics of the game and gets you also used to bigger bosses to come. Design-wise, it's a demon. You see quite a few of these throughout the game. And then, you see some forms of them in Dark Souls 3 as well. Lore-wise, it's again just the demon spawned from the Bed of Chaos. To my knowledge, I think this particular one was Wandering Lordran, ended up getting to the Undead Asylum, and then kind of serves as a gatekeeper there to keep all the undead locked away from the rest of the world. And obviously, in order to get out of there, you have to beat it, right? You have a chance to beat it at the beginning. If you take like the black fire bombs, you can kill the Asylum Demon incredibly easy to get the demon's Great Hammer. Otherwise, you'd have to beat the Asylum Demon with a broken weapon, which is possible, it just takes forever. So you're deciding to basically come in and fight it a second time. And I did find this to be a little interesting. If you fight it quote-unquote normally, and it's funny because the next boss, a lot of these things are going to tie together actually. You do a plunging attack. Oh, just kidding, there's one other boss before it. Anyway, you do a plunging attack which could do a massive amount of damage to the Asylum Demon. And I thought it was funny because the soundtrack for the Asylum Demon is a good one, but it's also another one of the reused ones. The Asylum Demon and the Taurus Demon both share the same soundtrack. And I think it's a really good one. It kind of gets the juices flowing. It's a little bit more upbeat. I don't know. It's definitely one of my favorite tracks in the game. I don't know what. It's almost like every time they make a banger track in this one, they're like, yeah, let's reuse that. Because they did that for the Moonlight Butterfly, for this one. And obviously Iron Golem as well. But yeah, the arena, you're in the Undead Asylum. You kind of revisit a room that you were in earlier. There's enough room in there to navigate. There's things that could be broken. It's overall, without really thinking too hard, maybe the second best tutorial fight that they've come up with in the modern library, if you will. So, with all that being said, Asylum Demon, C. Top of the C. Alright, now we're getting into some of the bosses that when people have criticisms of various FromSoft games, even Elden Ring, stuff like this pops up. The Stray Demon. So, the Stray Demon, I have also in the C tier, and currently, as it stands, I have them at the bottom. They're not at the real bottom, though. We'll get there. The Stray Demon is basically the Asylum Demon. So I'm not going to go over everything once again. It's the Asylum Demon on steroids. It has much higher HP, does much more damage, and has an extra move set of AoE attacks, which definitely add to the difficulty. Design and lore, basically the same. The arena is actually very similar. The arena for the Stray Demon is the one, it's directly below the Asylum Demon. When you go back to the Undead Asylum, this is a optional boss, obviously. You could fall through the floor in the Asylum Demon arena, and then you fight the Stray Demon down below. The music, I already went over it. It's the same soundtrack for the Iron Golem, which is awesome. So the two things that I think that has going for it, this fight, is the soundtrack is great. And I feel like it's fairly challenging, because you can go back to the Asylum pretty early, and the massive HP bump that the Stray Demon gets, coupled with the AoE, could be very difficult, especially for a first-time playthrough. And if you're not doing a lot of damage, it could be difficult in general, because if you kind of get caught napping, so to speak, you can die pretty quickly, and the fight can last a long time. You do get a Titanite slab, I believe, from killing the Stray Demon, which is pretty sick. But overall, it's kind of just a reskin, so eh. And up next, I have the Taurus Demon, which is typically going to be most players' second boss that they fight after the Asylum Demon. I have the Taurus Demon also in the C tier and actually directly below the Asylum Demon. I think technically the Taurus Demon is optional. I'm pretty sure you never have to go that way, right? Yeah. I always fight it because like I have a hard time skipping bosses, but anyway. First play can be challenging, especially when you don't know where you're going and you don't really know the mechanics of the game. Getting to the Taurus Demon can feel like a feat all in its own, and then if you miss the bonfire on the way there, you'll probably end up dying and being very frustrated, which is what happened to me on my first playthrough. But in general, not the most difficult boss. Probably the most difficult thing about it is the arena, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Same goes for like SL1 or Armor of Thorns, whatever the case may be. It's okay. And ultimately, one of the things that the Taurus Demon has going against it is the Taurus Demon reappears later on as a regular enemy in multiple forms. So it kind of cheapens it a little bit. Design-wise, I think it's great. The general lore of it is another demon spawned by the Bed of Chaos and the Chaos Flame, Witch of Izalith, that sort of thing. So pretty cool, but again, you know, you end up encountering a bunch of them later on, so it kind of cheapens it a bit. Music, I already went over it. Soundtrack itself is really good, but it's the same one for the Asylum Demon. And I don't know if it was done on purpose or just lazily, but it's funny because the arena lends itself almost exactly the same way as the Asylum Demon, at least in one aspect. You're able to climb up. As soon as you enter the arena, you can climb up the ladder, which is advisable because there's going to be two hollows shooting arrows at you, so you might as well kill them. But you could actually continue to climb up there during the fight to do continuous plunge attacks against the Taurus Demon, which is very similar to the plunge attack that you will likely do when you fight the Asylum Demon. The rest of the arena itself is a straight and narrow bridge path, but one of the interesting things is some of the sides are broken off, so it's possible for you to fall off, and it's actually also possible to get the Taurus Demon to fall off, which kind of lends itself to some interesting things. I didn't know about that for a long time, until a couple years ago. But overall, I think where you fight the Taurus Demon, again, typically it's going to be like your second boss. I think it's a really good natural progression from Asylum to Taurus Demon. It ups the difficulty a little bit, not too much, and you kind of continue to learn mechanics and world building and stuff like that, so it's pretty cool. All right, up next we got quite possibly the most scrutinized and polarizing boss in the history of From Software, the Bed of Chaos, formerly known as the Witch of Izalith, and I'm not gonna do any bait and switch or crazy surprise drop on you guys. I will put this in the D tier. The only thing I'll say before we get into the more in-depth dive is I don't think it's as bad as people say. It's not great. It's not a traditional boss. It's a quote-unquote puzzle boss, so I think it kind of cheapens a little bit after the first playthrough. You know, being soul level 1, armor of thorns, none of that shit really matters. Anyways. The challenge of the fight is, again, it's a puzzle boss. You could do it straight up. There's a bunch of different ways you could do it. You could just do it normally where you enter the boss arena. You have to basically disarm 2 orbs, which are hidden behind like wood vine things. And then you can get to the quote-unquote core of the Bed of Chaos, which is like this little bug. And then when you kill the bug, the fight's over. Obviously, it's not as easy as it sounds. The Bed of Chaos is going to be swiping at you and doing firestorms and all this kind of stuff. There's 2 easy ways to take care of it. One is you kind of run right up to the center, and you could position yourself properly to take out both orbs and then, you know, fall down to the core. I think you could take them out with fire bombs. I've never done that before. One of these days I need to kind of learn how to do it. Or you could do the way that I normally do it, which is you have a bow with a lot of arrows, and you drop into the arena. You go to the one side, you shoot it out. I typically go to the right first because it's easier. The floor breaks as you go, and it can turn into like a jumping fest where when you get swiped and knocked in, that's one of the reasons why people hate it. So I just go to the right because the floor is a little bit more easily navigable. You shoot it out, and then you save quit, brings you out of the arena. The orb's still done. You go back in, go to the left. It's a pretty easy path where you don't have to jump over things. As soon as you shoot that orb out, save quit, brings you back out of the arena, and then you go in, and it's the final countdown, if you will. So after that, my strategy is you kind of run straight, but to the right a little bit, and you could drop down or roll down onto this sort of branch that goes up like that. That's why you can't just run straight. You have to go off to the right a little bit, and then eventually you get to the core. You have to break through a bunch of more sticks and wood and vines. Hopefully Bed of Chaos doesn't do Firestorm, which can kill you at lower health for sure, and then you basically one-shot the actual boss, which is the bug on the inside. The bug basically makes a reappearance in Dark Souls 2, by the way. Anyways, so yeah, it can be a very challenging fight, but when you know what to do, it's really easy. For the most part, I always one-shot it, or do it in one try these days. Design-wise, I think it looks pretty cool. Again, it kind of sucks that it's not a traditional boss, but it is what it is. Lore-wise, again, it's the Witch of Izalith. Fought alongside Gwyn, a Lord Soul Bearer. You need to beat the Bed of Chaos to beat the game. The Witch of Izalith had a bunch of Daughters of Chaos who you find throughout the game in various forms. And then obviously, the Chaos Flame went crazy. Demons started spawning. Everything became jacked up. Obviously the witch used to be an actual witch, and now she looks like this. That sort of thing. So I actually do find the design and lore to be quite interesting. The music is interesting as well. It's, again, not one of the tracks that I would say like, oh yeah, I can't wait to listen to that one today, but I feel like it sort of encapsulates the mystery and intrigue of what's going on in there. Like, it almost feels magical, which obviously, excuse me, the Witch of Izalith had, like, the pyromancy. I guess it's not magic, right? It's pyromancy, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, the music's alright. In the arena, it's, again, a puzzle boss, so you have to deal with the pitfalls of the arena and all that sort of thing. I feel like it's adequate in that aspect. But yeah, I could totally see why people hate this boss. I don't particularly like the boss. There's a reason that I have it in the D tier. It is what it is. It really loses its luster after the first playthrough because it's just a puzzle boss. Once you learn your way through, that's kind of it. And you could even cheese it like you said, or like I said earlier with the firebomb method. So up next we have a DLC boss, our first DLC boss that we're going to be ranking anyway. And that is Artorias, the Abyss Walker. And I have Artorias in the A tier, but below the Four Kings. I find Artorias to be fairly challenging no matter what you're doing. First playthrough, casual, SL1, or I didn't say it at the beginning, but I keep going back to Armor of Thorns because I really had to like diagnose fights doing doo-doo damage. But yeah, it's definitely a very challenging fight. He has a bunch of attacks that can be difficult to dodge. He has some attacks that are incredibly quick and get you off guard. He could buff himself. It is a challenging fight, I could say. He obviously has some windows that are very easily punishable, but overall, you know, it definitely serves its purpose being in the DLC. It's expecting you to kind of be there later. I touched on it earlier, but you can go to the DLC before Sif, where you get that special cutscene, you know, where you fight Artorias before Sif. But yeah, overall, fairly good challenged fight, I would say. Design-wise, looks really cool. Love the armor. Love that he's like melting and rotting away from the abyss. And lore-wise, he was one of the premier knights of Gwyn, along with Ornstein, Hawkeye Goff, and Kieran. So that's cool. And obviously, you hear all about, you know, Gwyn, the Abyss Walker. He traversed the abyss and fought it off and all that kind of stuff. But the sad reality is that Artorias fell to the abyss. He actually, like, he tried to be a hero, but he wasn't able to. Probably the most heroic thing that he did was, I guess, trying and saving Sif, right? One of the details is that he used the shield to protect Sif, and that's why his arm's like broken and dangling in the fight. And Artorias definitely starts leaking out some of that berserk influence for sure. Like when Guts is in the armor in Berserk. But yeah, anyway, pretty cool fight. Love the design. The lore is cool. The music's good. I would say it's probably the most memorable track from the DLC, in my opinion. And the arena is really cool. You fight him in like almost a traditional arena, which is kind of refreshing. And it's kind of cool because, you know, you're fighting off against this great legendary warrior. Definitely one of the highlights of Dark Souls for sure, all across the board. So love this fight, and that's why it's in the A tier. All right, we have another DLC boss now with Black Dragon Kalameet. I actually only have Kalameet in the C tier. Currently, I have him below Nito and above Seath. So challenge-wise, Kalameet is actually pretty difficult. I would say on a first playthrough, it can be very challenging. SL1, my first few runs, he was a pain in the butt. I feel like there's only a few super safe opportunities to hit Kalameet. Otherwise, he's pretty intimidating and on the offensive quite a bit. The fire, it can just be absolutely insane. And for that reason, I do think he's one of the more challenging fights in the game. He could be a bit sporadic too and kind of annoying, which I think can draw the ire of, you know, some players for sure. Design-wise, he's obviously a pretty cool-looking dragon, has like the orange eye and all that kind of stuff. I think he's very, very memorable looking in terms of dragons that you fight throughout the series. You know, lore-wise, he survived through the extermination of the dragons by the lords. You know, he's in the, I was gonna say Darkroot, because it is, but the Ulasil area, and he kind of wreaks havoc on there, like Goff. In order to actually get Kalameet on the ground, you have to meet Hawkeye Goff and he has to shoot him out of the sky. It is possible to kill Kalameet, you just have to be insanely overpowered and have crazy magic and stuff, shooting him out of the air. But the traditional way to fight him is to have Goff shoot him down, and then he's no longer able to fly very well. So clearly there's a lot going on there, stemming back from the war against the dragons. Music-wise, I actually really like his soundtrack. I think it just kind of, you know, really feels like it's going to be this epic legendary dragon fight. And I think it kind of matches it to a T, especially, again, it's a DLC boss. It's typically going to be one that you fight towards the end of the game, and it kind of feels as such. And the arena is good too. I mean, it's nothing crazy. It's an area that you've basically seen before in the Dark Route, but it's back in the past. There's a Titanite slab under a little mini waterfall. The way you enter the arena, you could drop down, or you could go down on a ladder. It's wide open, which obviously it needs to be. You can get caught up in the walls sometimes with some of his fire attacks, which can be quite annoying. And I do think it's possible. Yeah, I think if you run all the way to the end of the arena, you can fall off, but I typically don't fight him over there. All in all, it's like a good fight. I don't know. There's something about it. It's just not... I find Kalameet at times to be a little annoying, and I'm not a huge fan of the moveset, so despite the challenge, despite the music and the lore and the design, it's just like an fight to me. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the dragon fights in the series. I think my favorite is probably Midir still. But yeah, it's okay, and that's why it's in the C tier. Another DLC boss, Manus, Father of the Abyss, and this is going to be my first, and I'll say spoiler, the only S tier boss that I have in Dark Souls. I think Manus is the best boss in the entire game. I think it is the most challenging fight in the game, whether it be first play casual, SL1, Armor of Thorns, anything. With that being said, he absolutely destroyed me so much on my first ever SL1 run that I learned that fight inside and out, and I could probably do it with my eyes closed at this point. So don't take that for, you know, the gospel. In general, yes, this is a hard fight, and I do think it's the hardest fight in the game. It can be not trivialized, but make a little bit easier with the pendant, because you're able to ward off his magic spells without actually having to dodge them, which is nice. But yeah, it's a very challenging fight. I love the design of him. He's just this huge beast dude with this crazy staff and this deformed arm that looks like it's reeking of the abyss. Lore-wise, it's interesting. He was a primordial human that was buried in Ulasil. He was a sorcerer. At some point, I think Koth dug him up, or made the people dig him up or something like that. They were looking for a Dark Lord after the flooding of New Londo. And yeah, basically at that point, Manus was awoken and went into a crazy frenzy and started spreading the abyss everywhere, aka the Father of the Abyss, and that's why he's in the Chasm of the Abyss. I think there were rumors that he might be the furtive pygmy that they mentioned in the opening cutscene, but I don't think that was ever verified. Might have actually been debunked at some point. Anyway, music's great. The arena is really cool. It's a little bit of a step up above of the Four Kings, where like you're fighting in the abyss, right? But you could see a little bit. There's like a true outside of the arena. There's some stuff in the middle of it, and then after you kill Manus, you're able to see what was it, Princess Dusk lying on the ground, and it's just all in all like the total package. The design, the lore, the challenge, the music, the arena, the fact that it might be your final or second to last boss before you fight Gwyn. Obviously, if you fight Gwyn, the game's over. Manus just checks all the boxes for me. Absolutely love Manus. I don't think there's a better boss in Dark Souls 1 than Manus. Up next, we have, I believe, yeah, the final boss of the DLC, which, well, for the rankings, it's the first boss of the DLC, and that of the Sanctuary Guardian. And I actually have the Sanctuary Guardian in B tier, just above Gwyn. Sanctuary Guardian is basically just that, the Guardian of the Sanctuary. It's the first thing that you fight when you get into the DLC, and it's basically the Gatekeeper. It is a combination of a bunch of things. It's like a lion and a goat and a scorpion and like a bird of some sort. And because of that, it can present a pretty decent challenge. It's able to move very fast. It's very ferocious. It could fly. It shoots lightning at you, and you're in an arena where there's water, so it could actually do like a ripple AoE effect onto you. You could actually be poisoned. I think you could be toxic, right, from it. It has a tail cut. And again, it's another one of those things where it's like the first few times you play it, it's definitely a little bit more challenging. The more and more you play the game, you can kind of manipulate it a little bit. But for somebody that might not know the moveset very much, I think it's a really good, adequate challenge heading into the DLC. And I kind of went over the design of it already, but as far as the lore goes, I don't know if there's too much. I kind of have some notes over here. I think it's basically just, you know, guarding the sanctuary, right? So I don't really know. Music-wise, I think it's pretty good. I don't think it stands up to me for Artorias and Manus personally, but I don't think it's bad by any means. And I actually really do like the arena. I like that it's wide open. Again, the boss can fly. It's very fast, very frenetic. And I do like the little touch of the water being in there and you being able to eat some damage from the lightning attacks because of that. All in all, I think it's a perfect entry to the DLC, and that's why I have the boss as high as I do in the B tier. All right, up next we have the Bell Gargoyles, which I actually think is one of the finest fights in the game, and because of that, I actually have them in the A tier, above the Four Kings and Artorias. I think they're a very challenging fight on a first playthrough, mostly because you don't know what you're doing, and you probably don't have a very strong weapon. It can be challenging on SL1. The whole thing is you're probably going to want to get, I mean, at the very least, you want a +5 weapon. If you can come back with a +10, it kind of trivializes them a little bit, but I think they're technically one of the earlier bosses that you can go to, and yeah, with that, it can be very challenging, and I really like this fight because it's a gank fight, but it's not like a true gank fight, meaning like you fight the first gargoyle, and then when it gets down to a certain amount of health, the second one will spawn in, and that one's a little bit more passive. It kind of just sits back and shoots fire at you. So again, first few playthroughs could be way more harder, way more difficult than future ones when you kind of really know it, but I like the challenge, especially for where it is in the game. Obviously, the gargoyles themselves look really cool. From what I understand, they were you know, stone gargoyles, right? Given life through the gods by magic. And they are guarding the first Bell of Awakening. You have to ring the 2 Bells of Awakening in order to get into Sen's Fortress. So all in all, like so far, challenge-wise, the design and the lore, sick. Also love the soundtrack for the Bell Gargoyles. One of the best tracks in the game actually does make an appearance in Dark Souls 2 when you fight that version of the Bell Gargoyles, which isn't as good. And the arena's awesome too. You're fighting on the rooftops, like where you'd expect to find gargoyles, right? So you have enough room to traverse, right? But when there's 2 there, and if you're getting a little too close to the edge, you might fall off, so gravity can be an enemy, and that kind of lends itself to the challenge, right? And yeah, overall, it's like, I feel like when FromSoft really nails a boss fight, they nail it, and I think the Bell Gargoyles in DS1 are some of the finest bosses, even though it's a boss, that they've ever come up with, so high A tier for me. Up next, we have the Capra Demon, which would be higher, but for now I only have it in the C tier. I actually have it just actually right here in the middle of Nito and Kalameet. So the Capra Demon can be very difficult. The main reason is because of the arena, so we're gonna go at this a little bit differently. So the Capra Demon is definitely a challenging fight. Soul level 1, first play, Armor of Thorns, whatever. Because it is a gank fight. You're dealing with the Capra Demon, but you're also dealing with dogs as soon as you enter the arena. And I did a no-hit run, so I did a lot of resets, and I noticed that there's like 3 different ways the fight could start. One where the Capra like lunges at you immediately. There's one where the dogs come at you in a certain pattern, and then there's another one. So more often than not, you're going to be absolutely dive bomb before you get into the arena. So unless you have a lot of poise and a good shield, you're probably going to get hit. And it's very frenetic. You want to take care of the dogs, right? Because if you have to deal with 2 dogs who can cause bleed on top of the Capra, it's not going to be a good time. The way the arena is constructed is very interesting. It's kind of like a small enclosed flat plane, but then there is a stairway up on the left-hand side and a little walkway on the top which you could drop down from. And you could utilize this in order to kind of manipulate your way around the dogs in order to kill things one by one. With that being said, depending on the weapon you have, you might be clanking your weapon against the wall trying to kill things. So all in all, it can be very difficult. If you want to be a total noob, you might as well just go in with like sick armor and the wolf ring and maybe just swang and bang with like a Zweihander and just hope for the best. Once you take care of the dogs, you can really focus on the Capra, who has, you know, can be difficult, but it's not the most like unique and crazy moveset. The true difficulty comes from the gank aspect in the arena itself. The design of the Capra Demon's awesome. It's another demon that was spawned by the Chaos Flame, very similar to the Taurus Demon. And unfortunately, much like the Taurus Demon, it is a boss that ends up getting copy and pasted as a regular enemy later on in the game, which I feel cheapens it. The soundtrack is awesome. Capra Demon is definitely one of my favorites as well. It really nails like the demon feel. It feels otherworldly. demonic, oppressive, and it's, you know, the Capra Demon is very metal, if I do say so myself. So I like the Capra Demon more than some of the bosses in the C tier. I feel like, you know, again, cheapening it a little bit with the copy and paste later on, and the dogs can be quite annoying. Otherwise, I probably would have had it higher on the C tier, but I feel pretty happy with where it is. Up next, I have the Ceaseless Discharge, which in my opinion is the worst boss in the game. I actually have it below the Bed of Chaos. You might see a little, feel bad for you, Witch of Izalith. Apparently the Ceaseless Discharge is her only son. And yeah, I don't know, this fight just doesn't do it for me. From a challenge standpoint, if you stand at attention and fight the Ceaseless Discharge, like basically you're supposed to run to the end, grab the armor set, and because you grab the armor set of one of his fallen sisters, then he gets up and fights you, right? You could see him the whole time, but he's not aggroed unless you specifically do that or aggro him. And fighting the Ceaseless Discharge, the quote-unquote, like, I don't even know what the intended way is. I guess the other way that I'm going to get into is the intended way, but it can be difficult. With that said, if you grab the armor and simply just run all the way back to the beginning, the Ceaseless Discharge will jump over a gap, hang on for dear life, and then after a short while and getting hit, will fall off to its doom. So the reality is, as long as you grab the armor, have a decent amount of stamina, and just run all the way back and hit it a couple times, it dies. It's one of the easiest fights in the game. You can get a pretty sizable soul gain from that. You could fight the Ceaseless Discharge basically after Chaos Witch Quelaag. It gets rid of the lava down at the bottom. It's not a real challenging fight. It's basically almost like a gimmick fight, right? I think at the end of the day, it was probably intended for it to jump over the gap and fall. Design-wise, you know, it looks like a Chaos Demon. Like I said, it's the son of the Witch of Izalith. You know, controls the lava in the Lost Izalith area. And it's pretty cool. Like, I do like the lore from the Witch of Izalith and the Chaos Flame and all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably the best thing it has going for it. Music-wise, a very forgettable soundtrack. The arena, again, it's just, you know, there's like a spot where you could fight them. Otherwise, you just kind of run back, and I don't know. To me, it's the worst boss in the game, and I don't think it's even close. I think the Bed of Chaos at least has a better gimmick going for it. A little bit more challenge. Again, fighting Ceaseless, like, straight up can be difficult because there's like, it's tough, trust me. But overall, to me, worst boss. Alrighty, now we're hitting the Centipede Demon. You're probably starting to see a pattern here with Chaos and Demon enemies. Centipede Demon's actually going to be at the bottom of the C tier for me. It can be a challenging fight, mostly because the entire arena is just flooded with lava. And the Centipede Demon has crazy appendages which could fly at you, so depending, you know, on first playthrough, casual, SL1, whatever, it can be difficult. My advice is to get in and go over to the right side of the arena where you have more of a platform to fight on. Obviously, you do have to jump over and walk through some lava, so you're more likely than not going to take some kind of damage. And you can cut off parts of the Centipede Demon. One actually drops the orange charred ring, which apparently that's how the Centipede Demon came to be. The Ceaseless Discharge was given that, dropped it, and the Centipede Demon apparently kind of like formed from where it dropped. Don't know if that's accurate, but that's what I heard. The design, it certainly looks like a centipede and a demon mixed together. And it jumps around like crazy too. I wanted to point that out. But it's just, I don't know what it is. The demons aren't that great in general. I actually really do like the soundtrack though. I think it kind of like, again, encapsulates the demon feel, the centipediness of it all. Like when you hear it, you kind of understand what I'm saying. And the arena, like, while memorable, I don't necessarily like it. It's just filled with lava and kind of crappy. And I don't think that the Centipede Demon is so bad that it needs to be in the D tier, but to me it's like the worst of the rest, if that makes sense. So that's why it is where it is. All right, up next we have Chaos Witch Quelaag, which, unlike some of the other demon fights, I actually love this one. And no, it's not because of the booba. I do have her actually at the top of the B tier for a couple reasons. One, I do feel like this fight is fairly challenging, especially since most people will be down here at most having a +5 weapon. She has a pretty decent health pool and can do major damage. If you don't stick close to her body and you get hit by her swipes, it's pretty rough, especially at SL1. Even if you stay close to her, you run the risk of possibly running into some lava that she's spewing throughout the arena, or you can get stuck on her at times, which is kind of annoying and sort of a downward trend in terms of like likability for this boss fight, and she could hit you with an AoE. But because of all that, I think it's a very challenging boss fight no matter when you fight her. Again, if you go in, you know, as a base cannon, if you will, and you just destroy her, like, I could see it, but unless you really know what you're doing, or you're doing some crazy poise build, it can always be pretty difficult depending on how you play. Armor of Thorns was difficult as well. So yeah, much props there for the Chaos Witch. Love the design, love the fact that it's like, you know, this basically, what would be the word? Alluring, seductive lady, but then the reveal comes and it's like, holy crap, you're this giant chaos demon bug thing, what the hell? And I think it's very unique, and I love her Fury Sword, which looks like fire. She's obviously another daughter of Chaos from the Witch of Izalith. She's the Fair Lady's older sister, and she kind of serves as the guardian to the demon ruins in Lost Izalith almost. She's obviously stationed at the end of Blighttown, which kind of makes sense. It's sort of given more. It's like a transition between Blighttown and the demon area almost, right? Soundtrack's great. I think the arena serves its purpose. It's not super memorable from an aesthetic standpoint. I mean, going in there, it's pretty crazy. It's like spidery looking. You get like the eggs and the webs because she's sort of like a chaos spider bug thing. The arena itself kind of just looks like a destroyed ruin area, which is good because she does obviously spew lava across the arena and jumps around a lot, so you need a lot of space. And there's some steps towards the end as well. And I think there's actually a spot that you can get up and cheese her. One of the other cool things is if you land like hits on the body of her, she actually gets staggered and stunned. So overall, I think it's actually one of the finest bosses in the game, and that's why I have her at the top of the B tier. So up next, we have a very interesting boss, but not one of my favorites, in that of Crossbreed Priscilla. I have her on the C tier above the Stray Demon. If I could actually do that, that would be great. There we go. From a challenge standpoint, well, first of all, you don't have to fight her. Completely optional. You could just jump out of the painted world and not fight her. If you do fight her, it's actually an interesting gimmick. She'll go invisible, where you can only see her footsteps, or if you do things like throw certain projectile weapons at her, you can kind of see where she is. She can deal a massive amount of damage. She has like an interesting sort of like snow effect to go with the disappearance. And from that standpoint, it's pretty cool. Challenge is, again, how much damage are you doing at that point of the game? If you're doing a lot, she could die super quick and super easy. Like, you know, I think there's been times where I killed her with like 3 hits, maybe. Even at soul level 1, it's not too bad. I do remember the Armor of Thorns got a little treacherous. And lore-wise, she is another like crossbreed sort of thing created most likely by Seath. I don't think it was verified, but I'm pretty sure that she was. And she was feared by the gods and kind of like stored away. I think she was actually at the Undead Asylum first, probably why the doll's there. The peculiar doll, right, to get into the painted world. And then, yeah, she gets stuck into the painted world of Ariamis, and she's kind of at the end, and again, you don't have to fight her. But, yeah, she's pretty cool, because, again, she's, like, peaceful and nice, and then, obviously, if you choose to swing and bang on her, things change at the drop of a hat. The music kind of exemplifies the fight itself, I think. You know, she's kind of otherworldly abomination, if you will, but also sort of, like, I guess has a bit of a beauty to her, and for that reason, I think that the soundtrack fits it very well. And the arena's pretty cool too. It's very confined. You know, it's at the end of the painted world, and I don't know, all in all, I don't think there's that much to say about this boss. I kind of have her where I have her for a reason, and I'm sticking with it. All right, up next we have Dark Sun Gwyndolin, who I also have in the C tier, just above Crossbreed Priscilla. Can we do it? Can we do it? There we go. And an interesting one to break down here. From a challenge standpoint, the fight also isn't that hard. Gwyndolin pretty much only has 3 attacks. One is a very big, booming magic attack, which will pass through walls, because he can kind of hide on the side pillar things. A magic attack where these little ones kind of come out at you in flurries, and you can hide behind the pillars in order to, I guess, completely dodge them. They hit the pillars and then they dissipate. And then Gwyndolin will go into this like strategy where he starts shooting arrows at you, but they're very easily dodgeable if you kind of just move around like an S almost, and then once you get close, you can hit Gwyndolin. One thing I want to point out is the arena actually does end. It seems like it never ends as Gwyndolin keeps going back and back and back. It's like part of the illusion thing, but doing the Armor of Thorns run where you're not doing much damage, the arena actually ends and then Gwyndolin can't move anymore and the fight's like completely like the easiest fight in the game at that point. But most players won't get there clearly unless you're doing absolutely no damage. From a design standpoint, actually pretty cool looking. I've always liked the design of Gwyndolin. The helmet, faceplate thing, the legs, which are basically just snakes, kind of floating, ethereal, that sort of thing. And the lore behind Gwyndolin is interesting. It was the last-born child of Gwyn, and Gwyn actually raised Gwyndolin as a woman. So Gwyndolin's actually a man, but was given women's clothing and a magic ring to kind of move and act more femininely. It's very strange, but I find that to be pretty alluring, if you will. And then obviously I mentioned earlier that Gwyndolin comes back in a certain aspect in Dark Souls 3 when Aldrich devours Gwyndolin. And the other cool thing is Gwyndolin is part of the illusion of Anor Londo. Basically, when you kill Gwyndolin, the illusion is free. Oh, excuse me. When you kill Guinevere, the illusion is freed, but Gwyndolin, I believe, is behind that. The whole light Anor Londo and dark Anor Londo thing. Because the only way to actually get into Gwyndolin is wearing the ring that you could find in the catacombs. Otherwise, you're able to get in there and fight Gwyndolin if you're in dark Anor Londo by, you know, killing the illusion of Princess Guinevere. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there, I'll say that. And the music, again, top tier, but once again, recycled from the Moonlight Butterfly, although technically probably Gwyndolin's theme. And I touched on it already. The arena is basically a big, long, illusory hallway with pillars on the side that could be used to avoid certain magic projectiles, eventually ending. So it's an interesting gimmick. And it's funny because in general, you'd think all the good things that I said and the weird and interesting things that I said would make this a lot higher on my list. But all in all, the actual fight itself, again, is so rudimentary. It's just like chase down Gwyndolin and avoid 3 different attacks, and that's it. And then if you have a strong weapon, Gwyndolin dies pretty easily. So because of that, that's why I have Gwyndolin where I do on the C tier. All right, and up last, we have the Demon Firesage. Very similar to the other rankings that I had. We're gonna plop the Demon Firesage in the C tier towards the bottom. Just above the Centipede Demon, if I could actually do that. Great, did that, there we go. From a challenge standpoint, it's actually a little bit more challenging, I find, than the Stray Demon. The arena is a little bit more tricky, which kind of lends itself to the challenge. You can kind of get bopped a little bit easier, and the Demon Firesage has a lot better magic and or, I guess, pyromancy skills going for it. Very similar attacks, it's basically the same boss, just a reskin for the most part. The design, again, very similar. The arena, again, more kind of enclosed. There's like branches and chaos type stuff all over the place. It has like the feel of like the Demon Ruins and Lost Izalith going on in there. Soundtrack is what it is. And I guess probably the only thing that's really unique about it, aside from, you know, the reskin being more red and whatnot, it's actually a little bit different than the other demons. This apparently was one of the first generation of demons created. Kind of like a demon priest, if you will. And apparently, I'm going to read it verbatim here for you guys. The Firesage Demon is one of the demons that were generated after Izalith and her daughters managed to stabilize their new flame, thus gaining a more defined body and control over the power of chaos inside of its body, which makes sense. It's definitely the most refined of the bunch. It's definitely the one that seems to have the most oomph and gusto when it comes to the chaos flame type abilities. With all that being said, it's an optional boss. Typically, I find that you're probably going to fight it after, obviously, Asylum Demon and the Stray Demon, so by then you're like completely just tired of this boss. So for that reason, I have it so low as I do in the C tier. Whew. All right, guys, so that's the end of the tier list. I constantly forget how exhausting these can be. I've basically been sitting here for about 2.5 hours doing all the recordings in bunches, and I still have to edit this. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Again, remember, this is a opinion tier list. This is not some sort of definitive tier list. This is just based off of my many playthroughs and many different playthroughs of the game and how I enjoy the bosses. I'm sure there's some on here that you guys disagree with. If you do disagree, let me know. Just be cordial about it, please. Don't be rude. Again, this is just a opinion tier list, so again, hopefully you enjoyed, and yeah, I'll probably get the Dark Souls 2 eventually sometime soon. I'll have to drink 17 energy drinks for all those bosses though. All right, take care.